Welcome to Excel Labs video number 7. In this demonstration, we're going to test various scenarios using break-even analysis and CVP. CVP stands for, as you know, cost, volume, profit. However, before you proceed, make sure to have the instruction sheet available, which you can download from Moodle, as well as the Excel file named Excel Labs Video 7 CVP Scenario Analysis XLS. It's very important that you familiarize yourself with the questions asked on the instruction sheet before you continue following the demonstration. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to construct a table in which we're going to calculate a break-even point in both units and in pounds, and then we're going to modify this table in order to enable us to perform a scenario analysis, testing all three scenarios which you have laid out in the instruction sheet, and then answer the following questions. Which of the three scenarios will be most likely to be preferred if the main decision criterion is the break-even point, and how the increased selling price, variable cost, fixed costs actually impact our scenarios. And also we're going to compare scenarios 2 and 3 to scenario number 1 and then make a decision. Before we do that, let us enter the date right here. Now, of course, you could just enter the date, but we want Excel every time you open this workbook to use today's date. Now, Excel has a function in order to do that for us, which is called today. So we trigger the function using the equal sign, and then just type today and press enter. So as you can see, that this demonstration was recorded on the 13th of July 2012. And now we just want to copy this across to cell D and center and merge it so it looks the same way as in rows 1, 2, and 3 up here. Now you need to be careful. There are various ways of dragging a cell across depending on the intention you have. You have already encountered copying a cell across, so you move the cursor over the little black square down here, the right hand side, and drag it across, but this would copy the formula. This is not what we want, so let's delete this again. Select the cell and then keep the cursor in the middle of the cell so it remains a white cross, and then just drag it across, press the left mouse button, and then drag it across, and then on the Home tab in the alignment group just press the merge and center button, and there you go. That had merged 4 cells. And to be consistent with the format above, bold. Now the next step, we're going to construct the table for our analysis. So we jump into row number 7A7, column A, therefore, and we type selling price. In row 8, type variable costs. In row 9, contribution. In row 10, we want the contribution to sales ratio, or to determine how successful, so to speak, a sale would be in terms of contributing to covering the fixed costs. Then we skip a row. In row number 12, we're going to add the fixed cost. In row number 14, the break even in units. This would be our standard break even point. And in row 16, the break even in pounds. Well, You can see that these need a little bit more space. That's what we're going to do. And let's make them all bold. Here on top here, in row 6, cell B, we're going to type scenario number 1. Right, now we're going to just insert the figures from scenario number 1. Now what is scenario number 1? Let's have a look at the instruction sheet. It says Giggle Limited could sell and lease back an important machine for the production process. This would mean a fixed cost of 110,000, a variable cost of 55, and a sales price of 99. So the sales price is 99. The variable cost is 55. And the fixed cost is 110,000. Now we're going to calculate the contribution. So remember, the contribution is that amount which can be used for contributing towards the covering of the fixed cost. So that's what we're going to calculate. So contribution per unit equals the sales price minus the variable cost per unit. That's the contribution per unit, 44. So again, hope you remember this, selling price, so sales price minus variable cost per unit. The contribution to sales ratio. Contribution to sales ratio gives us the amount, or the percentage of each pound we earn through a sale, which can be attributed towards covering the fixed cost. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna calculate. You see the contribution divided by the selling price of 99. This was delivered as a fraction, or more or less. This number is not very nice, so let's reselect it. We can express this in percent. So we move to Home, the Home tab, Number Group, and we select percent. A few more decimals would be good because this information can be much more granular. So on the same group, we have the two decimal buttons. One increases the decimal, one decreases the decimal. We want to increase it by 2 decimals. So we need to click twice. It says 44.44%. So what does this mean? This means that for every pound we earn through a sale, 44.44p can be used in order to contribute towards covering the fixed cost. Now let's have a look at the break-even in units. Now the break-even in units is quite straightforward to calculate and should already be known. We trigger the function and we need to divide, of course, the fixed cost by the contribution per unit. Please do not divide by variable cost per unit or selling price. Break-even point is the fixed cost divided by the contribution per unit. And that's 2,500 pounds. Units, not pounds, of course. We move to the break-even in pounds. That's merely the break-even in units, the 2,500 units, times the selling price. That's the break-even in pounds. Now we hit enter here as well. This delivers us 247,500. This has the bold. There you go. Now before we continue, let's do a little bit more formatting. So we want these 3 here, as well as this one and the break-even in pounds in a specific format. Now, how do you select non-adjacent cells, as I just did? Well, adjacent cells are quite easy, so do these first. Press the left mouse button and just drag it down. And now, before you click this cell, press the Control key and then click the cell and the break-even in pounds, and you see that now there are non-adjacent cells selected as well. This very often speeds up what we need to do. Therefore, now select the currency. This would give us the standard currency. In this case, because of the system I'm working on in euros, we want it in pounds. Therefore, we click the little button here in the corner, right here. So this would open the dialog box, giving us more options. So we click on the currency, and then again, as I said, depending on the system you're working on, pounds might already be pre-selected. Just get rid of the 2 decimals, and now if the pounds are not automatically selected, we are going to look for them in the drop down list. Here they are, here are the pounds. Click OK. Now that looks much better. Now it's clear that these are monetary values. This, do not format this one because these are in units. So very well. A little more formatting before we continue. The contribution is a result of those 2 on the top. So select the cell, go to the Home tab Font Group, and now click on the bottom or on the border button, but on the down button, and we want to select the top border right here. Top border, second option in that list. Clicking on the top border, and this would add a nice line here after selling price and variable costs in order to indicate that the contribution here is a result of the upper 2. Now basically you could go quite a long way to format this table. We leave it at the moment as it is, and we're going to create a table now, not a table, a figure, a chart, a graph based on these numbers right here. Now we're going to do this right below. Now you need to consider that for us it's relatively easy now to draw this because we don't need that many data points, but Excel needs a lot of data points in order to calculate the break-even point. Now Excel needs to approach this in a specific way, and we need to provide that data for Excel. So we're going to start probably right here. Now, we start off with the number of units as a header, so we're going to construct a table now. And this table will contain various data points along the break-even graph. So the units, very important, we need those. We need the sales. We need the variable costs, which I abbreviate as VCs. We need the fixed costs. And then we need to calculate something called a total cost. But these are the components we will require in order to draw our break-even graph. Let's make these bold. Now, as far as the number of units are concerned, we need to now create a whole range of these units, starting from 0, because we want to draw them, and then up to a specific point. Of course, it would make no sense to start with 0, 1, 2, 3. That would make no sense because, as you know, the break-even point is at 2,500. So that would make not much sense, and for our purposes would not be practical. For our purposes it might be better practical, and this is basically a judgment call. If we do this in steps of 500. And you should know the trick by now. If you type in two values and you select both cells and then copy these cells down, Excel sees by what increments the values are increased and then increases it on its own. So 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 and so on. Let's do this until 5,000 and then release the button, and Excel has filled the values exactly as we wanted. And now I hope you see what should be materializing when we have filled this table. It should be materializing that we are going to calculate the sales, the variable costs and the total costs based on the number of units we are selling. So in itself a scenario analysis. So the sales, which that means the total sales, equal, let's trigger a formula, the number of units times the sales price, and we have the sales price already stated. You just need to scroll up a little. It's right here, times 99. Now before you press enter, we need to consider that we need to copy this formula to other cells. So at this point it's always good to stop and briefly consider, do we need an absolute reference anywhere in our formula? Let's consider this. Now if we want to drag this down to the other cells, we would stay in the same within the same column. But we would change the row. Now this would be alright for this component because we want for each row, for each sales data point, that this formula should move down with it. So we would be fine with the units. However, the reference to the price should not change. If we drag this down, the reference to the price would also move down with it. So in this cell, it would be multiplied with the variable cost. So I hope you remember from the video, the references video, how this works. I can just show you briefly. So if I copy this down without any care in the world, you would see that we would multiply 500 units times variable costs. This would not be correct in that case, at least not for this cell. So what do? We need to move the cursor back into the formula bar, select the reference to the price and make this reference absolute. And you can do this by either entering the dollar signs in front of the column and the row, or if you want to be really smart about it, you select the reference and then press F4. There you go. It's much quicker. Press enter, and now we can copy this down. See, that looks much better. Let's make a quick check. This is indeed the sales price times 4,500. As you can see right here, sales price is selected and 4,500. Press enter. Now we do the same thing with the variable costs. The variable costs are the total variable costs, the number of units times the variable cost per unit, which are 55. Again, before you press enter, it's the same deliberation as before. We want the row to change, but we do not want the reference to the variable cost to change. So we press F4, make this absolute reference, and then move this all the way down. Oops, more careful, right here, copy it down. Quick check. Always do quality control when you work in Excel. So it's the 3000 times the 55. There you go. That looks very good. Now with the fixed cost is a bit quicker, because the fixed cost, as we know, is a cost that does not change according to output. Therefore we just make a reference to the cell where fixed cost is referred to, and also make this fixed because we want to drag this down again. We want to copy it down, so make this reference fixed or absolute, which is the correct terminology. Press enter, copy it down. One more. And now the total cost is just the sum of the variable cost plus the fixed cost. Variable cost plus fixed cost. Press enter. In this case we don't need to adapt any references because they should move down with it. So we copy this down. Just make a quick check right here. Yes, it is the sum of 275,000, 110,000. That's the total cost. Now we can use this table in order to draw a break-even graph. How do you do that? You select the whole table, so A19 to E30, go to the Insert tab, and now do not pick the line chart in the charts group. You need to pick the scatter chart. Click on the down arrow and then select this right here. Its name, scatter with straight lines. So click on this one. Excel does the work. That looks already very good. A little modification will be necessary. Just drag this out of the way so it does not overlap with the table. A little more. There you go. Make this even a bit broader. Now this almost looks like a complete graph. However, we would not really need the variable cost line right here. It was necessary in order to calculate the total cost, so we cannot just skip it right here. But you can now select it in the graph, this line, the variable cost line, and then just delete it. Press delete. Now this looks pretty much like a break-even graph as we know it. 100,000 pounds. And here you see slightly that this is about 2,500. So this would be the break-even point at 247,500. So that's about right. Okay. Now this would be scenario number 1. In order to compare scenarios later, let's make just a side note right here. We're typing the scenario number 1 once more, but just the break-even point. Now don't make a reference to it because we will change the cell. So don't make a reference to this cell here. This will change. So here, this is just for us for note taken, 2,500. Scenario number 1. Now we're going to create scenario number 2 and 3. Now of course you could just enter the numbers here, but what if more scenarios pop up? You can now ease make your work much easier by defining a list right here. So how are we going to do that? We had that before, but let's do it again. We need to select an area of the worksheet where we can hide a cell later. So just move over here Here is fine because this is already beyond the graph. And now we enter sales price, variable costs, and fixed cost. These are the components which change. Sales price, variable cost, and fixed cost. And now we're going to define a range of values right here in order to determine a list values. So now I need to again decide what range would make sense. Let's have a look at the scenarios. We have sales prices of 99, 129, and again 129. So we could say, right, just in case to cover our cover all bases, we can define sales prices from 90 to 140. So what do we need to do? Similar as before, we define two values, select them, 90 and 91. Now you tell Excel, increase this by 1 each, and then you copy this down all the way until you reach 140. There you go. For the variable cost, let's have another look. Variable costs are between 55, 70 and 65. So we'd say, alright, the variable costs should not be higher than the sales price. 55 is the lowest, so let's say, alright, we consider cases from 50 upwards all the way to 90. Yeah, 90 would be enough, because we say, alright, if in the worst case we have a sales price of 90 and a variable cost of 90, that would be basically 0. Now for the fixed cost, we don't need as many. We have 110,000 pounds, 135,000 and 110,000. So you say, alright, we cater for the case that it's starting at 100,000 and we increase it by increments of 5, so 105,000. Yes, be careful how to define the increments, and then copy this down. And as you can see, 110,000, 115, and so on. And we do this until we reach 135. Let's cater for the case that it might increase in another scenario, which we are not looking at, to 150, just in case. Now, if you have these lists defined, or if you need to define them, remember you can always pause at any point. We're going to move on to defining the lists. Now, in order to define the list, we are selecting the cell containing the sales price, then going to the Data tab, do the data validation, and we click either up here or down here and select data validation. Now, at the moment, any value is allowed. You could even type in text, and it would return an error in the formulas, but you could type it in. We want to tell Excel, no, only a list of pre-selected values is allowed. And now we're going to tell Excel where this list of pre-selected values actually is. In this case, it's for the sales price. So make sure to take the full range in you just defined to 140. There you go, and press OK. Now, let's see what has happened. Now we have, when we select the cell, a drop-down arrow. If we click that arrow, you can see that now Excel has the full range of values right in there. We keep this on the 99 for now. Now repeat that step, data validation, list, allow list, the source box pops up, and then we select a range of values for the variable cost. to 90 and press OK. Let's check if it has done what we wanted it to do. Yes, looks good. There's our range of values. One more, the fixed cost, data validation, list, fixed cost, select, and press enter. There you go, same story. Our range of values is right in here. Now we just tidy up the place a little bit. We're going to hide those three because we don't want any values in there to change coincidentally. So we need to select all three columns, right mouse button, and select hide. Now notice this does not mean it's deleted. If it would be deleted, there would be no values feeding the list and the lists would be empty. If you want to unhide it again, you need to select the two columns adjacent to the left and right of the hidden columns, in this case O and S, right click again and click unhide. And there they are again. It's always better to hide these values because they're not really useful to see. We need them in the lists anyway. And now we can actually have a look at the various scenarios. We can change the values, and even better, it might happen that more scenarios turn up. A scenario number 4, 5, 6, 7. And with that table now, and with this the graphs, we can quickly analyze this. Now let's have a look at scenario number 2. I'll just delete the 1 here. Scenario number 2. Erin is considering renting a new plant for the production of the tablets in Japan in order to benefit from the local knowledge in the tablet markets. This would result in a higher fixed cost of 135,000. Let's change the fixed cost to 135,000. You should already see there are things changing down here as well. So everything is connected by formulas, and just the input factors are being changed. So we're testing a scenario. How does it continue? A higher variable cost of 70. The variable cost is 70 then. Let's have a look at the list. 70. And what about the selling price? However, due to the expected higher quality of the tablets, the sales price could be set at 129. So it would increase as well. Excellent. Now let's have a look what the outcomes of this scenario would be. Now our contribution has increased. Remember, it was 44 before, now it's 58. However, the contribution to sales ratio is quite different. It's not that different. It's just a little bit higher. So instead of 44p, it's 45p. You can use for each pound earned. The fixed cost has increased. That means that the break even in units is now 2,328. Yeah, remember that we of course have no 0.58 units, so we always round up. So let's just type this in here in our little notes taken. So this would be 2,328. So that means the break even point has gone down. So in this scenario, we would reach the break-even point quicker. Let's look at scenario number 3. Scenario number 3, let's make this a bit larger. Let's see, there you go, here as well. Scenario number 3. Alternatively, Giggle Limited could enter a joint venture with a Japanese competitor. This would enable them to sell the tablet at £129, Just thought there was a little mistake. It's 129. Does this have any effect? 22288. Okay, it's even lower. See, so this is why you always need to do quality control. It would be 2289. So apologies. This price would remain the same. The variable cost would increase in terms of increasing from scenario number 1 to 65. Scenario number 1 had 55 and we are looking at 65. How about the fixed costs? The fixed cost would actually remain at 110,000. So let's quality check this time. 129 is the price, 65 the variable cost, 110,000, and we see that the break even in units are 1,719. So that's quite a difference. We also see that the break-even graph shows this 110,000 and just below 2,000 units. Now let's answer our questions. So question number 1, which of the 3 scenarios will most likely be preferred if the break-even point is the main decision criterion? Clearly scenario number 3. Why the lower one? Let's make this in bold. Because the sooner a company reaches the break-even point, reaches the point where the fixed costs are covered, the better. And in this case, this is quite a difference to scenario number 1. It's a difference of almost 800 units. So we would reach the break-even point 800, almost 800 units earlier than under scenario number 1. And scenario number 2 is slightly better. It's just basically in the middle between those two. So clearly scenario number 3. Now how did the increased selling price, variable cost and fixed cost in the scenario 2 impact the break-even points in units and pounds compared to the break-even points calculated under scenario 1? Well, the break-even points decreased slightly, and why was that the case? Well, let's move this back to the scenario number 2. It's quickly done. The price was, or the variable cost was 70. And the fixed cost was, let's see how this changes right here, 135. To 2,289. Now the main difference is all the components have increased, but the selling price has increased by 30, the variable cost by 15, so they have not increased by the same amount as opposed to scenario number 1, and therefore we have a higher contribution per unit, and the increase in fixed costs by 25,000, so from 110,000 to 135,000, was not as much as to compensate for this increase. So a bit less, a little less units, about 211 units less are necessary in order to cover it. This is already quite a big jump. So the impact in this case was clearly that the break-even point has slightly decreased. Let's answer the last question. Why did the change in variable cost and fixed cost under scenario 3 not impact the break-even point in units and pounds as significantly as under scenario 2? Well, this is a bit of a trick question, because the question itself implies a result. However, if you look at the actual result, you see that the impact on scenario number 3 was very, very heavy. It was quite an impact. As we said, that's clearly the best scenario. So the answer to that question would be, well, in fact, scenario number 3 was impacted much more, because what happened in scenario number 3, the variable cost did not increase as much, not to 70, only to 65, so by 5 less. And what's even more important, the fixed cost remained the same as in scenario number 1, which is why there were 2 components in favor of reaching the break-even point on the scenario 3 much earlier. Well, this brings us to the end of this demonstration. Well done. Don't forget to save your file, and if there's anything unclear, rewind the video, pause the video, watch it as many times as you need or want in order to get acquainted with those concepts.